The auctioneer called it lot number 7, Thornton Creek Winery. 12 acres, a tasting room, a barrel house, and a vineyard that had not been properly maintained in 2 years. Tax lien auction. Loudoun County Courthouse steps. 9 buyers registered. Craig Thornton was one of them. He submitted a check for $210,000. The check bounced. The auctioneer moved to the next bidder. I raised my hand and said $195,000, cash. The gavel dropped in 4 seconds. I bought the winery that anchored the HOA community, whose president had spent 4 years trying to destroy my chicken farm. Craig Thornton stood on those courthouse steps and watched a chicken farmer sign the deed to his life's work. His wife, Pamela, had filed a $420,000 lawsuit to get rid of my birds. Now my birds were about to become the main attraction at the venue she built her entire community around. I named it Jennings and Vine, farm-to-table dining featuring heritage pastured chicken from the farm next door. The farm she tried to shut down is now the reason people drive to Crestview. Stay with me. But this story does not start at a courthouse. It starts at a fence line, at dawn, with 300 chickens and a woman in a white Range Rover who decided my farm did not belong. My grandfather Harlan Jennings bought 40 acres in Loudoun County, Virginia in 1968. Paid cash from 12 years of construction work. The man had hands like catcher's mitts and a voice that could quiet a room without raising it. He wanted chickens, not a hobby flock, a real operation. Heritage breeds, Rhode Island Reds, Barred Rocks, Buff Orpingtons. Birds with lineage and purpose. He built the coops himself, milled the lumber from oaks he cleared on the north parcel, laid stone walls along the eastern boundary, fieldstone pulled from the creek bed, stacked without mortar, fitted so tight you couldn't slide a playing card between them. Those walls are still standing. I lean against them most mornings while I drink my coffee and listen to the valley wake up. The mist sits low in the hollows until about 7. By then the chickens are already busy, scratching through the clover, and the mountains turn from gray to blue to green. My father never wanted the farm. Became an accountant in Reston, wore pressed khakis and spoke about spreadsheets the way Harlan spoke about soil. So Harlan raised me out here, summers and weekends, until I moved in full-time at 22. I took over the operation when his knees gave out in 2003. He died in 2009. Left me everything: the land, the birds, the stone walls, and the stubborn belief that good work speaks for itself. The farm runs 300 birds now, pastured, free-ranging on 40 acres of grass, clover, and insects. Heritage breeds, same lines Harlan started. The eggs are something special. Deep orange yolks, shells so thick you have to crack them with intention. 11 restaurants in Washington, D.C. buy from me exclusively. $8 a dozen. I drive the delivery van myself, twice a week, 90 minutes each way on Route 15. The road cuts through horse country, past white fences and hay bales wrapped in plastic like enormous marshmallows. My wife Sarah died 5 years ago, ovarian cancer. Diagnosed in April, gone by September. Ellie was 9. She's 14 now. Every morning before school, she's out with me, collecting eggs, topping off waterers, checking for broody hens who've decided today's the day they sit on a clutch and refuse to budge. She doesn't complain. Never has. Some mornings, I catch her talking to the birds in a low, steady voice that sounds exactly like Harlan's. We don't have much, but we have the farm, and the farm is enough. Then, Craig Thornton arrived. 4 years ago, Craig bought the 60-acre parcel directly east of my property line. Prime Loudoun County land, rolling hills, mature grape trellises from an old vineyard that had gone bankrupt. He's a developer out of Fairfax. Big smile, bigger belt buckle. The kind of guy who calls everyone buddy and means none of it. He built Crestview Vineyards Estates, 32 luxury homes priced between $800,000 and $1.2 million. Tudor-inspired facades, 3-car garages, homeowners association with covenants thicker than a phone book. The centerpiece? Thornton Creek Winery, a boutique operation right at the entrance. tasting room, barrel cellar stacked with Missouri oak, patio with a view of the Blue Ridge. Craig positioned it as the crown jewel. Buy a home in Crestview, get a vineyard lifestyle. Wine country living, 45 minutes from the capital. His wife Pamela became HOA president the day the first family moved in. Blonde bob, white Range Rover, clipboard in hand and grievance on her tongue. The woman radiated authority the way a space heater radiates warmth. Aggressive, indiscriminate, and slightly suffocating. Her very first act as president was filing a complaint with Loudoun County about agricultural odor emanating from my property. Morning mist was still settling in the hills. Dew clung to the stone walls Harlan built. 300 chickens clucked and scratched in the grass beyond the fence line, and Pamela Thornton had already decided they needed to go. The first letter arrived 6 weeks after Crestview's grand opening. Certified mail. HOA letterhead with a little grape cluster logo in the corner. I could smell the toner. Dear Mr. Jennings, the Board of Directors of Crestview Vineyards Homeowners Association hereby formally requests that you relocate or substantially reduce your poultry operation. The presence of approximately 300 chickens in immediate proximity to our community constitutes a nuisance. Excessive noise, persistent odor, and the attraction of vermin, rodents, and predatory wildlife. These conditions materially diminish the residential and commercial experience of Crestview Vineyards estates. Materially diminish the wine tasting experience. That was my favorite part. As if a barred rock hen pecking at clover 60 yards away was somehow ruining somebody's Cabernet. As if the soft clucking of heritage chickens was drowning out the delicate process of swirling, overpriced Chardonnay. I put the letter on the kitchen table. Ellie read it while eating cereal. She looked up at me with a spoonful of Cheerios suspended halfway to her mouth. Can they actually make us get rid of the chickens? No. Then why'd they send this? Because some people confuse wanting something with deserving it. She went back to her cereal. Outside the window, a rooster crowed his opinion on the matter. I didn't respond to the letter. My property, my chickens, my grandfather's farm. The HOA had no jurisdiction over land that wasn't part of their development. This was like a restaurant sending a noise complaint to the bakery next door. You don't get to dictate what happens on someone else's property just because you moved in nearby. Loudoun County zoning maps made it perfectly clear. My 40 acres sat outside the Crestview subdivision boundaries. Their covenants had exactly as much authority over my chickens as I had over their wine list. Pamela didn't appreciate the silence. 2 weeks later, she called the Loudoun County Health Department, claimed my chickens were creating a sanitation hazard. An inspector came out. Young guy, polite, clipboard of his own. He walked the property with me for the better part of an hour. Checked the coops, the composting system, the drainage. He took soil samples near the fence line, knelt down in the red clay, and scooped it into vials. The chickens watched him like he was the most interesting thing that had happened all week. Results came back clean. No violations, no concerns. He told me my operation was one of the best maintained he'd seen in the county. Pamela called animal control next. An officer came, counted birds, reviewed my agricultural exemption. 300 chickens on 40 agricultural acres. The county limit for non-agricultural properties was 50, but mine was zoned A1 agricultural. I could have run 3,000 chickens and been within code. The officer shook my hand on the way out and said his grandmother used to keep Orpingtons. Good birds, he said, gentle layers. His eyes got soft, the way people's eyes get when they remember something from childhood that actually mattered. I heard nothing for a week. Then the sheriff's department called. Noise complaint. A deputy drove out on a Tuesday morning. He stood at the fence line between my property and Crestview, notepad open. The chickens were doing what chickens do, scratching, clucking, the occasional startled squawk when a hen got too close to a rooster's personal space. Morning dew still clung to the grass. The gravel road ticked with heat as the sun climbed. The deputy listened for about 4 minutes. "These are chickens," he said. "Yes, sir." "They sound like chickens." "They do." He closed his notepad, wished me a good day, drove off. 3 government agencies, 3 inspections, 3 clean bills. Any reasonable person would have stopped. But Pamela Thornton wasn't running on reason. She was running on entitlement. And entitlement doesn't have a shut-off valve. The The woman treated the word no like a speed bump, irritating but not remotely final. Her next move was the petition. She went door to door in Crestview, all 32 homes, got 12 signatures. The petition went to the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, demanding a nuisance abatement order against my farm. The core claim? Property values in Crestview had dropped 15% due to proximity to a commercial livestock operation. 15%. She had a number and everything. No appraisal, no comparable sales analysis, just a number she liked the sound of. The scratch of chicken feet on packed earth carried through the morning air. Pamela's white Range Rover sat idling at the fence line. I could see her through the windshield, phone pressed to her ear, lips moving fast. Her pearl earrings caught the light each time her head bobbed with emphasis. I went back to feeding my chickens. The Board of Supervisors scheduled a hearing for the third Tuesday in October. Loudoun County Government Center, room 204. The kind of room where the fluorescent lights buzz loud enough to give you a headache, and the folding chairs squeak every time someone shifts their weight. Carpet that hadn't been replaced since the Clinton administration. The smell of old coffee and institutional indifference hung in the stale air. Pamela came prepared. Tailored navy blazer, pearl earrings, 12 Crestview homeowners arranged behind her in 2 neat rows, like choir members waiting for the downbeat. She'd hired a PR consultant, a woman named Lacey with a tablet and a tight smile, to coach the residents on their talking points. Stay calm, reference property values, use the phrase quality of life at least twice. Avoid mentioning the winery by name. Before the hearing, though, Pamela launched the social media campaign. #ProtectOurVineyard. A Facebook group with drone photos of Crestview looking pristine next to my farm, which she'd photographed from the angle that made the composting area look largest. Instagram posts of wine glasses with captions about the threat next door. A local mommy blog picked it up. Suddenly, I was the villain in a story I hadn't written, a character in someone else's fiction. The consequences arrived fast. Hostile looks at the Safeway in Purcellville. A woman in the produce aisle actually pulled her cart away from me like poverty was contagious. Someone threw eggs at my delivery van in the Harris Teeter parking lot. Store-bought eggs, thin shells, pale yellow yolks, not even good ones. My van still smelled like sulfur the next morning, and I had to scrub the paint before my DC run. Ellie came home from school on a Thursday with her jaw tight and her eyes hard. Kids had told her that her dad's farm stinks. A boy in her biology class said we were basically a factory farm. My daughter, the girl who hand-raises chicks in a brooder box every spring and names every single one. A factory farm. She dropped her backpack on the kitchen floor, harder than necessary, and sat at the table without speaking for 10 minutes. I sat with her on the porch that evening. The chickens were settling in for the night, that low murmuring sound they make when they're roosting, a sound like contentment given a voice. The hay bales near the barn glowed amber in the last light. I told her the truth. Some people look at a thing they don't understand and decide it must be wrong. That says everything about them and nothing about us. She leaned against my shoulder. We watched the fireflies come out over the pasture. A barn owl called from the oak tree by the north coop. The stone walls held the last warmth of the day. Dad? Yeah. Those kids don't know anything about chickens. No, they don't. The hearing arrived. Pamela testified first. 15 minutes of polished outrage. The chickens were contaminating the watershed. The odor was driving away potential home buyers. Property values were in free fall. She used the phrase quality of life 3 times. Lacey must have been proud. The 12 homeowners nodded on cue. 2 of them testified. A retired banker claimed he could smell chickens from his back deck. A woman said her daughter was afraid of the birds, afraid of chickens. Visible only if you climbed a fence and squinted across 60 yards of pasture. Then Pete Lowell took the stand, County Agricultural Extension Agent, 26 years with Virginia Cooperative Extension. Gray hair, wire glasses, the kind of man who weighs every word like it costs him money. He'd inspected my farm 3 times in the past decade. His testimony was surgical. Wyatt Jennings operates a model pastured poultry farm. fully compliant with all county, state, and federal agricultural regulations. His composting system exceeds EPA guidelines. His flock health records are impeccable. The operation predates the adjacent development by 52 years. Under Virginia law, the county has 0 grounds for nuisance abatement against a pre-existing agricultural operation. 0 grounds. He said it twice. The second time, he looked directly at Pamela. Her jaw tightened. Lacey stopped typing on her tablet. The board dismissed the petition, 5-1. The sole dissenting vote was a supervisor whose brother-in-law had just bought a lot in Crestview Phase 2. Pamela walked out without speaking to anyone. Her heels clicked on the tile like a metronome counting down to the next escalation. I drove home in silence. The Virginia hills were turning gold and rust in the October light. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. Did we win? This round, I wrote back. The lawsuit arrived on a Monday morning in November, hand-delivered by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Young guy, apologetic eyes, standing at my front gate at 7:15 while 300 chickens raised hell behind me. Frost still clung to the fence posts. My breath made small clouds in the cold air. Crestview Vineyards Homeowners Association versus Jennings. Filed in Loudoun County Circuit Court. Civil action for nuisance, property damage, and diminution of value, seeking $420,000 in compensatory damages, plus an injunction to remove all poultry from the property within 90 days. $420,000 for chickens. That number wasn't accidental. It was calibrated to be just high enough to terrify me and just low enough that Pamela's attorneys could argue it with a straight face. Ellie was on the porch, backpack on, waiting for the school bus. She watched the process server hand me the envelope, watched me read it. She didn't ask what it said. She could read my face well enough. The school bus groaned up the gravel road, brakes hissing. She squeezed my arm before she climbed on. This was different from petitions and phone calls. A lawsuit costs money to fight, even when you're right. Attorney fees, court filings, discovery, depositions, each step another invoice, another draw on savings I couldn't afford to lose. Pamela knew that. She wasn't trying to win on merit. She was trying to bleed me dry. Death by legal paperwork. I sat at the kitchen table that night with a calculator and a legal pad. Wrote down every number I could think of. Savings, monthly egg revenue, feed costs, truck payment, Ellie's school supplies. The math was tight. It was always tight. But a legal defense could drain the account in months. I called around the next morning. Got a referral to Trent Alderman, an agricultural law attorney in Leesburg. His office sat above a hardware store on King Street. The stairs creaked with every step, announcing visitors like a wooden alarm system. The waiting room smelled like old leather and burnt coffee. Framed photos of farmland covered every wall. Pastures, orchards, tobacco fields, grain silos against stormy skies. This was a man who understood dirt. Alderman read the complaint at his desk while I sat across from him. He got to page 3 and started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, a genuine head-back, pen-down laugh. They're suing a farm that's been here since 1968 for being a nuisance to a development that arrived in 2020? That's the gist. He leaned back. Virginia Right to Farm Act. Code Section 3.2-300. Let me read you the relevant part. He pulled a statute book from his shelf. Actual paper, dog-eared, highlighted in 3 colors. No agricultural operation shall be or become a nuisance by any changed conditions in the locality thereof. Not after the same has been in operation for more than 1 year. Here's what that means in plain English. Virginia, like most states, has a right to farm law. It exists because this exact situation happens constantly across the country. Developers buy cheap agricultural land next to working farms. They build luxury subdivisions. New residents move in and discover that farms involve animals, smells, and early mornings. Then they complain about the farm that was there first. The Right to Farm Act says no. If the agricultural operation was there before the development cannot declare it a nuisance. Period. Full stop. The farm was here in 1968. Crestview arrived in 2020. The lawsuit was dead on arrival as a matter of law. Alderman could have filed a motion to dismiss and ended it in 30 days, but he didn't. "Let's not kill it yet," he said. He set the complaint down and folded his hands. "Let her keep spending money on lawyers. Let's use the discovery process to look under every rock in that HOA, because something about this whole thing smells wrong. And it isn't your chickens." The weight of that lawsuit envelope sat in my jacket pocket the whole drive home. Legal paper has a particular crinkle to it, stiff, formal, designed to make you feel small. Bare oak branches arched over Route 15 like skeletal fingers. The mountains had gone gray with November. A hawk circled over the pasture, riding a thermal, patient and unhurried. I envied that bird. I've been farming for 23 years, raised a daughter alone, buried a wife, survived drought, avian flu scares, and a feed price spike that nearly broke me in 2017. I wasn't about to let Pamela Thornton's signature on a piece of paper take my home. Discovery is a beautiful thing when you're on the right side of it. Alderman filed our response and immediately issued discovery requests. Financial records, HOA meeting minutes, correspondence, contracts between the HOA and any affiliated businesses. Standard stuff, the kind of paperwork that makes guilty people sweat and innocent people yawn. It took 6 weeks. Pamela's attorneys fought every request, filed 2 motions for protective orders, and tried to limit the scope of production 3 separate times. Aldermen swatted each one down like gnats at a picnic. The judge was not amused by the delays. She issued a compliance order. The language basically translated to hand it over or face sanctions. When the documents finally arrived, Alderman spread them across his desk like a surgeon laying out instruments. 4 banker's boxes, 3,000 pages, and buried in the middle of it, the truth. Finding number 1. Thornton Creek Winery owed $340,000, $180,000 in delinquent property taxes to Loudoun County, $160,000 to vendors, grape suppliers in Napa, a barrel company in Missouri, a bottling contractor in Charlottesville who'd stopped returning Craig's calls. The winery was hemorrhaging cash. The tasting room that was supposed to anchor the community was drowning in red ink. Finding number 2. The HOA had been funneling homeowner dues directly to the winery. Every month, $8,200 in association fees went to Thornton Creek. The line item read, Community Amenity Maintenance. 32 homes paying $650 a month equaled $20,800 in total dues. Nearly 40% went straight to Craig's failing vanity project. The homeowners had no idea their money was subsidizing bad wine and worse bookkeeping. Here's something most people don't know about HOA fiduciary duty. An HOA board has a legal obligation to manage association funds in the best interest of its members. This isn't a suggestion, it's codified law. Using dues to subsidize a board member's private business isn't just unethical. It's a breach of fiduciary duty under Virginia's Property Owners Association Act. Every dollar that went from the HOA account to Craig's Winery was a dollar that could trigger personal liability for every board member who approved the transfer. That means Pamela wasn't just breaking rules. She was building a case against herself. Finding number 3. The nuisance lawsuit was never about the chickens. It was about the 6 unsold lots in Phase 2 of Crestview. Craig needed those lots to sell at full price to cover his debts. If property values dipped, for any reason, he couldn't move the inventory. The chickens were the scapegoat. Blame the farm for the stagnant sales, sue the farmer into submission or bankruptcy, and remove the excuse that kept buyers from signing. The humming of Alderman's printer filled the office as he ran copies. Every spreadsheet, every bank transfer, every email between Craig and Pamela discussing the chicken problem. They treated it like a strategic initiative, not a living, breathing farm that predated them by half a century. The late afternoon sun slanted through Alderman's window. Dust motes drifted through the light like tiny witnesses. 3,000 pages of evidence sat on the desk between us. Every lie cataloged, every transfer documented, every email time-stamped and preserved. Alderman looked at me over his reading glasses. They didn't just come after your farm. They used their own homeowners to finance the attack. I sat in that leather chair and felt something shift. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a reckoning. We built the strategy over 2 weeks. Alderman at his desk, me in the chair across from him, a whiteboard on the wall behind us, filling up with arrows and timelines. Outside his window, Leesburg's Main Street was strung with early holiday lights. The smell of roasted chestnuts drifted up from a vendor cart on the sidewalk below. Step 1. File the right to farm defense. Bulletproof. Ironclad. But file it slowly. Let Pamela's attorneys rack up billable hours preparing for a trial that would never happen. Every brief they wrote was money Craig didn't have. Step 2. File a counterclaim. Malicious prosecution, abuse of process, tortious interference with business relations. Pamela's campaign had cost me 2 restaurant accounts, one in Georgetown and one in Alexandria. Chefs who loved my eggs but didn't want the PR headache of sourcing from a farmer embroiled in a public dispute. That was quantifiable economic damage, and it had Pamela's fingerprints all over it. Step 3. Report the HOA dues pipeline to the Virginia Common Interest Community Board, the state regulator that oversees HOAs. A formal complaint with 3,000 pages of financial documentation attached. Let the regulators do what regulators do. Slowly, methodically, and without mercy. Step 4. Watch the winery. Alderman had a contact at the Loudoun County Treasurer's office. Informal, just a conversation about public records over coffee. The word was that a tax lien sale was coming. Craig had been delinquent for 18 months. The county had sent 3 notices. $180,000 in unpaid taxes on a commercial property triggers an automatic process under Virginia code. If Craig didn't pay within the statutory window, the lien would be sold at public auction. A tax lien sale works like this in Virginia. The county doesn't sell the property itself. It sells the right to collect the debt. The winning bidder pays the delinquent taxes plus fees. The property owner then has a redemption period to pay the purchaser back with interest. If they don't redeem, the purchaser can petition the circuit court for ownership. It's a slow process, but for someone who's already broke, it's a death sentence for their title. Step 5. Greta Willard. I'd seen her at the Board of Supervisors hearing. She sat in the back row, apart from Pamela's choir, arms crossed, face unreadable. The kind of woman who listens more than she talks, which in my experience means she's the smartest person in the room. Alderman made a call. Greta picked up on the second ring. She'd been on the Crestview board since the beginning. A former sommelier who'd moved to wine country for the actual wine, not the status. 6 months into her tenure, she'd questioned the community amenity maintenance payments at a board meeting. Pamela told her to trust the process. Greta pushed harder. Craig pulled her aside after the meeting and suggested she was overthinking the accounting. She'd kept copies of every financial document she could access, receipts, transfers, emails. She was willing to testify. Step 6. My restaurants. I called all 11, explained the situation plainly. No drama, just facts. Asked if they'd be willing to write letters of support. Not for sympathy, but for the record. Documentation that my eggs were a premium product supplying Washington's culinary economy. Every single chef said yes. 11 letters on restaurant letterhead. One from a James Beard nominee. Another from a chef who'd been featured in Bon Appetit. These weren't sob stories. They were business endorsements from people who stake their reputations on ingredient quality. Step 7. Bo Kendrick. My neighbor on the farm side. 60 years old. Retired large animal veterinarian. The kind of quiet man who shows up when it matters and says very little otherwise. Built like a fence post. I asked him to conduct a formal health assessment of my flock. He spent 2 days on the property with his stethoscope and his clipboard. His report ran 14 pages. Clean bill of health, disease-free, vaccination records current, parasite management exemplary. The words model operation appeared 3 times. That evening, I walked my property at sunset. The chickens were settling into their coops, that soft churring sound they make as they find their roost spots. The Virginia sky had gone purple and gold over the Blue Ridge. I stopped at the stone wall and looked east toward the winery. The tasting room lights were off. The parking lot was empty. Wine barrels sat stacked near the loading dock, untouched. On their website, half the events were canceled, and tasting hours had been cut to weekends only. A single wine barrel had tipped over near the loading dock. Nobody had bothered to right it. The cracks were showing. All I had to do was wait. Pamela found out about the counterclaim on a Thursday. I know because Greta texted Alderman at 4:17 that afternoon. She's screaming. By Friday, Pamela had a new plan. If she couldn't remove the chickens through the courts, she'd remove the farm through the county. She and Craig initiated a rezoning petition, a request to change my 40 acres from A1 agricultural to R1 residential. If approved, the agricultural exemption would vanish. 300 chickens on a residential property would violate county code immediately. I'd be forced to reduce the flock to 50 birds or less. The farm as a commercial operation would be dead. 23 years of work, gone with a zoning stamp. Here's what most people don't realize about agricultural zoning. The A1 designation isn't just a label, it's a legal shield. It determines what you can and cannot do with your land. Changing a parcel from agricultural to residential requires a public hearing, a planning commission vote, and approval from the Board of Supervisors. It also requires the consent of the property owner in most cases. But Virginia has an exception. If surrounding land use has substantially changed, the county can initiate rezoning over the owner's objection. Craig was arguing that Crestview constituted a substantial change. He was essentially claiming that his own development was grounds for destroying the farm next door. Craig called in favors. He'd built subdivisions across 3 Virginia counties. He knew the planning commissioners. He played golf with 2 of them at a club in Middleburg. The rezoning petition sailed through the preliminary review and landed on the Planning Commission's docket for a public hearing in January. Pamela went door to door in Crestview again. This time, her pitch was sharper, her smile thinner. Your property values depend on removing those chickens. Phase 2 won't sell with a farm next door. Your investment is at risk. She wasn't wrong about the investment part. She just had the wrong culprit. Anonymous flyers started appearing in my mailbox. Plain white paper, laser printed, no return address. Sell the farm or lose it. Then another, 300 chickens or your daughter's future, your choice. That one made my blood go cold. The paper trembled in my hands. You bring my daughter into this, you've crossed a line that doesn't uncross. I filed a police report the next morning. The deputy took notes. There wasn't much they could do without evidence of who sent them, but I wanted the paper trail. Everything documented. Everything on the record. Ellie found a second flyer before I could grab it. She stood in the kitchen holding it, reading it twice, her face cycling through confusion and anger and something harder. Something no 14-year-old should have to feel about her own home. Are we going to lose our home? I took the flyer from her hands, folded it, put it in the drawer with the others. This farm has survived 3 generations. It'll survive Pamela Thornton. She nodded, went back to her homework. But I saw her check the locks on the doors that night, and that told me everything about what this fight was doing to my family. Then Janine Calloway called, reporter for the Loudoun County Gazette. She'd been covering the Board of Supervisors hearing, noticed the lawsuit filing, connected the dots. She wanted to do a feature piece. Her voice had the careful excitement of someone who knows she's